Testing, 1, 2. Coming through.
All right, wow.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Fine Arizona day, and we're going to have some good stuff. Ron. We could pass 1, 2, 3. We can look at this thing. Well, it's just, if you just see it, you see it. That's the building, the church building in Jacksonville that we got for our church group, and then came 3 SWAT attacks over that deal. Generally speaking, it's a pretty big place, and would have had plenty of room for our church group, and then it had lots of offices and classrooms and everything, and we would have been able to teach, and make a real difference. But now I'm having to work to recapture that thing because, they put me through 3 years of intense litigation to basically save my own life. And they're unbelievably bad in Cherokee County, as it is all across the country. These guys in Cherokee County are so bad. Those who know Randy Kelton know that the guy's, really excellent, awesome in the law, can run circles around a lot of attorneys. But even Randy Kelton got convicted in Cherokee County. And on a bogus charge at that.
Who got convicted?
Randy Kelton.
How do you spell his last name?
Kelton. And you should be able to Google that, and you should come up with Rule of Law Radio, and you'll see Randy Kelton standing on the courthouse steps with the pillars there, and with Deborah Stevens, and we all went sailing in the sailboat on the lake in Austin, Texas, and the other guys, if you scroll on down, you'll see other talk show hosts, and you'll come to Greg Chapman and Don Terry, and they're in Alabama, and they bonded me out a couple of times from the jail. There was a time in the past when Don Terry's wife called me up and said, these patriots, they're all talk, and when it comes to my husband in jail, nobody can do anything. And I said, well, Marina, come on over, we'll get it squared away. And I get up to habeas corpus, and she and I went to the courthouse, which in Dallas, they got this huge, I think it's about 16, 17 stories, called the Frank Crowley Courthouse. And behind it is the Dallas County Jail, which, if I'm not mistaken, accommodates some 13,000 inmates. And it's like a monstrosity. Anyway, Marina and I go into the courthouse. I select a courtroom. We go into the courtroom, and the judge is at the altar, the bailiff is at his desk, and there's nobody else there, just the two of them. So I spoke up as I approached the judge's altar, and I spoke up and said, well, this is perfect, there's nobody else here, I'm not interrupting anything, I have an urgent matter for your immediate attention, habeas corpus. And the judge starts to look at it, and Marina, is so upset. She's literally shaking, and she wants to say something, and she knows we're, in her mind, that we have to fight grizzly bears and vampire bats to get this thing done. And so she's like, and he senses it. You can see what's happening, and he holds up his hand like stop, like a traffic cop. And he said, "Ma'am, since you have Robert Fox in the case, I'm sure everything will be okay." And I about fell over because the standard reaction is, "Get yourself an attorney and don't come back until you do." You know, but this judge knew me because he was the one where they tried to get me in the state to, put me in the funny farm. And that was the case where they brought in Dr. Grigson against me, and I had four doctors testifying on my behalf, and Dr. Tedford had the jury laughing out loud against Grigson. And so this judge had already seen something in his courtroom that he could hardly believe. So he looks at the habeas corpus. He said, "Well, I don't really have jurisdiction." I said, "Excuse me, every judge in this courthouse has jurisdiction for this." And he kind of paused. And then his clerk came in the room. He says, "Okay," he says, "I'll tell you what." He says, "You follow the clerk back there to the clerk's area, and I'll go around." And so Marina and I go back to the clerk's area, and the judge goes through his, passageway that he has behind him. He goes back there, and he's standing over the shoulder of the clerk who's got it on the computer, and he's making notes. And then he comes to us, and he says, he said, "Don Terry is in fact in the jail," and so on. He said, "One judge doesn't like to step on the toes of another judge. But if you'll go," this is in Kristen Wade's court, and he said, "If you'll go down to her courtroom, I'm sure everything will be okay." He said, "If you have any further problems, just come back and see me." So it was as nice as you could get. Marina and I go, and we go down the elevator, and we're going to Kristen Wade's court. Now, do you know the significance of that name?
No.
I believe you do. Not totally, but it's okay, it's this. Her dad was the one in Roe versus Wade. That was her dad. When he was a district attorney in Dallas, Texas, he litigated Roe versus Wade. And this is his daughter. I'm going into her court. So we get down there, and we're greeted by the court coordinator, and it's like the red carpet treatment. I mean, as soon as we got there, which meant that there was a phone call first. And we get in there, and the court coordinator says, "Well, we're going to get Mr. Don Terry in here as quickly as possible, and we'll get this thing handled." And she says, "We'll have it handled real quick." And she departs, and the bailiff, who's standing right close, he steps up to us and he says, "Well, even though they're going to try and get him here as quickly as possible, it's some bureaucratic process." And he says, "It'll take about an hour." And he said, "There's a cafeteria in the basement. Go down there and have a coffee and a snack or whatever." And he said, "If you come back in an hour, we'll get it squared away." So we went down, come back, and they brought Don Terry in, and he was released immediately. So it was like the fastest habeas corpus that, from presenting it to the judge to Don Terry being released was about an hour. And that was pretty darn quick.
Can you read my writing?
Yeah. We're going to address that off-camera stuff here momentarily. Before I forget, I was going to, I'd shared with you a number of important items, like, for instance, noise versus testimony. One of the things that if you're in a criminal trial, it's vitally important that you get a list from the prosecution of all the witnesses that they intend to call. And you need to subpoena those witnesses for yourself. Okay? And don't let them give you any guff about, the process and everything else. You got to get the list to the clerks, and the clerks need to take care of it. If it's a state case, the sheriff will do service of process. If it's a federal case, it's U.S. Marshals do service of process. Okay? You shouldn't have to pay a dime for any of it. I mean, other than the paper and ink to present your list of witnesses to the clerk, that you have the people that you want, but everyone that the prosecution is going to subpoena, you want on your witness list. Now I'll explain why. Because the prosecutor's going to ask them about ABC, and you get to cross-examine them. But you'll find that they will argue, not necessarily, but most of the time, and especially if you're making some headway. If you're making some headway, they are going to jump up and object that you're cross-examining outside the ABC, that little narrow block that they questioned them on. But you may want to question them on something like XYZ, So if the prosecution questioned him, well, did you have an arrest warrant? Yes, we did. And did you put on the handcuffs? Yes, we did. Did you take him to jail? Yes, we did. And that's fine. But you want to talk about the beating that you took when they got you to jail, and they're not going to want to hear that. Now, when you have them subpoenaed as your witness, they are a hostile witness. You get to ask them anything and even leading questions, which, a lot of people who don't have the experience, they start off with telling them the situation as opposed to asking questions. But you could practically do that if they're your witness and a hostile witness. So it's a tremendous advantage, and it may make the difference between winning and losing a case on that item alone. We should also mention another little tip. If you have some communications, like say it's a family member or a close friend that's in jail, and you need to communicate something to them, like even, some of the stuff that you've heard here, or, stuff that you don't want the systemites to know, okay? If you talk to anybody on the phone with the jail, you can count on it. Those calls are recorded. Everything that you send into them is photocopied, okay? In Dallas, I don't know if not Dallas, but in Texas, I don't know if you recall this, there was an incident where 7 inmates got out of the prison system, and they went from, I think around Huntsville, north to a suburb of Dallas called Irving, and there was a shootout at an Oshman's, and then they disappeared. Well, they traced back everything with regards to those guys, and even figured out the decoded messages that had gone before that set up the prison break. And so everything, they record everything. And by the way, to those guys' credit, when they were caught up with in Colorado, they were in a motorhome, and what they had been doing is Bible study and looking for a job. All they wanted to do was get a fresh start. And they were all put to death. the guy who led the break, I mean, he never had any intention of hurting anybody, but there was a shootout in Irving because a police officer did come, and it's unfortunate, you know. But the guy who led the break spoke up and said that he did it all. He says, I did it all. Everything is my responsibility. Execute me. Don't touch those other guys. They, you know, executed them all. Texas executes more people than anybody. It's just Rick Perry, the current governor, has executed 275 people. And by the way, the system is so oppressive. The prison system is so oppressive. In the past, there was a case called Ruiz versus Texas, and several prisoners got together and sued the state. It was a federal case about the conditions and the treatment, and they prevailed, and the feds took over the entire Texas prison system. And it's only been recently that they gave it back, and it's like, what's the point? Missouri sent prisoners to Texas because they were overloaded. At the Texas facilities, for sport, they put the German Shepherds on them. I mean, it's one thing to say somebody needs something and they figure, well, they just shoplift it because they don't have any money or whatever, and they end up in prison, okay? Prison's bad enough. But to have the dog set on you and chewing on your leg and the rest of that, I mean, that's ridiculous. Can we all agree? You know? And I'll share another one with you, which just comes to mind here. When that case, the Ruiz case, was heard, it was before Judge William Wayne Justice, and he declared that the Texas prisons were, an Eighth Amendment violation in cruel and unusual punishment, and he put the federal takeover on all of the whole prison system. In other cases, this guy in another case spoke up. Imagine there's a whole bunch of people in the courtroom, and William Wayne Justice said to them, I take my orders from the Queen. Boy, they didn't like that. That went out, across the country, and you may not have seen it, but that was, back in the day when the internet wasn't what it is today. But he said that right in open court, and the system didn't like that going on very much. They transferred him out. So the point being is all about communication at jail. And the point I'm getting to is this. Since they monitor the phones and they monitor the mail, how do you get a message in that's sensitive? And the way you get it in is you go to visitation, and they have a telephone there that's recorded. Okay? You watch to make sure where the cameras are, and so then out of camera range, while you talk about the weather, you stick your message against the glass so the inmate can see the message, and their camera doesn't get it. You like it? Okay? I mentioned this other one earlier, and in conjunction with fingerprinting, and the thought occurred to me, maybe I didn't make it clear enough, so I'd like to make it clear enough. I posed to them the question of what statute do you rely upon for summary brutality in lieu of normal fines and imprisonment? So if any of you go in and you say, I don't want to give them my fingerprints. And, you know, that my fingerprints are my property. And you understand this, that your fingerprints, they say, are absolutely unique. And since they were created, when our Heavenly Father created you, He gave you a set of fingerprints that are like unique, like a Picasso or whatever. You know, it's a work of art that is not to be duplicated as such. And most people don't get the significance of the fingerprints, because what they do with them, and this United States government manual will tell you this, they put them through, they gather them up all over the country here, and they go to the East Coast, and an East Coast police agency transfers them to Interpol. And so your fingerprints go into the hands of a police force that's global. And the thing about Interpol, everybody sees that at the beginning of movies and so on. Interpol, you know, that they're a dangerous outfit. And Interpol cannot be sued in any court on the planet, and is answerable to no national government. Yet the United States supports them to the tune of 30 million or more annually. Now, this is all adding up, but I'll take you a step further in this. There was a guy by the name of Race Bannon who was recruited to work for Interpol, and he wrote a book called Race Against Evil. And in that book, he laid it out that Interpol had 1,000 agents operating worldwide in one section of their operation. You know, they had multiple agencies within there, but they had one section called Operation Archangel, and in that section they had 1,000 agents around the world, each one of whom had killed between 100 to 200 people, assassinations. Okay? And he says that when he was recruited, he was absolutely positive that the first kill that he did was completely a righteous kill. But after that, it became less and less obvious. And so, what we're talking about, to make it specific for you, is if there was somebody who was wealthy and they did, say, child pornography and snuff movies. Now, a snuff movie means that they kill in the end. Okay, so if they kidnap an innocent child, do child pornography and torture, and kill the child on camera and market that for crazy people. Okay? And if the guy is impossible to get, they put an assassin on it to just wipe him out. Okay? The thing is, though, like Ray said, the first kill, he was positive was an absolutely righteous kill. But less so after that. And, you know, obviously came a time when he realized that he's doing political assassinations. Now, it works, or could potentially work like this. Obama calls him up and says, I've got a $30 million check here on my desk, but you know what? There's some of these people from Arizona that have given me a problem. And, you know, I'm not inclined to sign the check until these people are eliminated. Well, no problem. And any one of you can be popped the next day, you know? And then the $30 million check goes out. Does that seem unreasonable? And under the, you know, that's what they're set up for. And like I say, Interpol isn't answerable to any national government and can't be sued in any court on the planet.
Answerable to an international court.
Nothing. And they're the good guys. If you saw that movie with Clive Owen and Naomi Watts called The International, you know, I mean, they got these propaganda movies that try and make them look good. But then if you check with the folks with the Church of Scientology, they did an investigation of Interpol and determined that Interpol was the biggest drug runners on the planet. You can imagine they could come into any airport and tell the authorities, you don't need to search our plane, we're the police. Right?
Other question?
So with Interpol, somebody's got to be the head of it. There's got to have,
Well, that's a good one. I'm glad you brought that up. You must be a genius. Let's see here. Where did I have it? So Interpol had a start, right?
yeah,
And they had a boss, right?
I think, yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is it. Nazi Gestapo Colonel Otto Steinhausel, first president, Interpol. And they've been a Nazi organization ever since. And Paul Dickhoff, I forget what, 68 to 72 or something, president, 1968 to 72, president of Interpol, was former SS, or, you know, apparently, according to the research that I saw, that he was a former SS officer from World War II. Tell you what, let's pass this one around so everybody can read what says at the bottom there that he's the president and, from Interpol. And then, in the next break, I'm gonna set things up so they can copy the Dr. Brooks amicus curiae, and you'll see case law and that stuff, and like Government of Virgin Islands versus Sharula, and the offer of proof and that stuff. Susie, if you want to pass these up too, I ran these off. And good, okay, good. So, remind me, and when we're off camera, I'd like to make a comment on that, too. Okay, so, before we go off camera, I'm going to explain something, and that is about unregistered foreign agents. Shortly before World War II, there was a Nazi party in the United States, and they were gathering contributions and sending them overseas to Hitler to help the effort in Europe. And Congress said, we got to do something about this. So they created the Foreign Agents Registration Act. And so anyone who, if this is to make it so that the activity would be controlled out of Washington, D.C., if there are people who are gathering information and contributions and doing so for a foreign power, those three elements, then that is a highly restricted activity. And if you're collecting information and contributions for a foreign power, you must be registered in Washington, D.C. You must let them know what you're doing and, the total extent of your operation. And then they get to say yes or no. And if they say no, then you don't have a foreign agent's registration. And if you continue to do the activity, it's a 10-year felony. So, and this applies even to attorneys. Like, there was an attorney by the name of Rabinowitz that was representing Cuba, and Robert F. Kennedy sued him about the activity because he didn't have a foreign agent's registration. And so anyway, don't you know that if you ask an IRS agent, do you collect information? What's the answer? They sure do, don't they? Number two, do they collect contributions? Books.
Voluntary contribution.
And now, who are they working for?
International Monetary Fund.
That's right. They would have everybody they try to get everybody to believe that they're a part of the government. But like I said in the Don McCarley issue, I put in that one bit there about if they were claiming to be officers of the United States, then that's a 10-year felony. So they dropped that charge altogether, but the fact of the matter is that these guys are unregistered foreign agents. Now, there's a reason why they let this stuff happen. I mean, the whole country is coming under a communist thing. And if you study the Communist Manifesto, you get to realize that the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto are in full force and effect in this country right now. And the second plank is a progressive income tax. So there's a tendency in this system to, how shall we say, protect the issue of the income tax when it shouldn't be. But and by the way, did you know that the income tax had a start, but before there was an income tax, the Treasury had a big problem. You know what it was?
Overflow.
That's right. They had too much money in the Treasury. Treasury's bursting at the seams with the pressure of how much money they got, and they didn't know what to do. Well, now you get the income tax, and you got a multi-trillion-dollar debt. Surprise! So, anyway, this book, United States Government Manual, like I was mentioning before, this has got the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution right up front. And when you're going to make an argument about the Constitution or what it says, you've heard people say, well, you got to get a certified copy from the archives in Washington, D.C. and the rest of that. But I've never had a problem with having this. So you could just say to them, to whoever you got on the stand, would you please read the title of this book, the United States Government Manual. And then inside, the Constitution and whatever else you want them to read there. So you got all that. Then it's got,
Who is that published by?
okay, this is published by the United States Government Printing Office.
Okay, that's why it doesn't have to be certified, because anything that's printed by the government is
Exactly.
automatically-
Exactly. So, and this thing, this valuable tool, you want to get this, not the new one, because the new one will cost you about $65. They come out every year. But you want to get one back from the 80s or 90s. And these libraries have them, and they chuck them because the new one is out. But it's the old ones that are valuable, from the 80s or 90s.
Why is it more valuable?
Because they have taken a bunch of stuff out. The new one is approximately half the thickness of this one. Sanitized. That's the word, sanitized.
So what significance did they take out of it?
Okay.
What of significance did they take out of it?
Well, they stopped mentioning that the Secretary of Treasury is in fact the governor of the International Monetary Fund.
And the citizens in Puerto Rico, isn't it?
Pardon me?
The citizens of Puerto Rico, not
Is what?
citizens.
Oh, don't know, but he could be. The point I was going to make here is this: you've seen these things. Well, you're looking at a contract, and the two signatories are here, right? Now this says Treasurer of the United States. So this is the Treasurer of the United States. Over here it says Secretary of Treasury, but we don't know who's treasury. And you cannot contract with yourself. So you got this is the United States contracting with somebody else. And the somebody else is the International Monetary Fund. Not because I say so, because this book says so. Okay? So, and a U.S. passport will tell you that if you go into the service of a foreign power, like say for instance we're over in Moscow at Red Square, and those guys come by in the parade, and well, gosh, look at those spiffy uniforms and the wonderful way they march. Let's join up. You join up with the Red Army, your citizenship is gone in a flash. They may not happen within seconds, but as soon as the State Department finds out that you're in the service of a foreign power, your citizenship is gone. You understand? Okay, so this guy, Secretary of the Treasury, is in the service of a foreign power called the International Monetary Fund, and his citizenship is gone. Everyone who works at the United Nations, same thing. Even if you're the janitor, even if what you do is clean the latrines, sweep the floor, they pay them a bonus for the loss of citizenship.
There'll be some benefit to that.
Well, yeah, there's benefits to that. Like I explained yesterday, I'm not a citizen, and so that's just the way it is. The IRS attacked me and wanted to give me over 100 years and couldn't make it to first base. So when this guy becomes governor of the International Monetary Fund, and like a friend of mine in California pointed out, Geithner took the oath to the Constitution, but then as soon as he takes this office, that's gone. As a matter of fact, there's a case called Mendaro versus World Bank, and you don't need to worry about it, because here's the deal. Here's the plan for the future here. Because probably everyone or almost everyone has an email. Well, I'm going to be sending you a multi-page document about unregistered foreign agents and all this layout that I'm explaining. And so I can send it to your email, you can have it in your computer, you can update it from time to time, et cetera, okay? And like, I think you got the current guy's name in there, I think, but whatever. You can just, it's the same setup at all times. The Secretary of Treasury is the governor of the International Monetary Fund. He's expatriated, and what Mendaro versus World Bank says is that their allegiance is 100% to the bank and the fund and 0 to any other entity. That's the end of the story. So his allegiance to the United States is 0. And he's not paid one dime by the United States. His pay comes entirely from the International Monetary Fund. And he has diplomatic status, and that's just the way it is. Now, do you think that, with all the propaganda and everything else, and they get the children in the public school system to indoctrinate them in government stuff, and they actually teach them how to fill out 1040, and they don't teach them anything like you're learning here. Now, so they come out into the after school, into the job market, and one of the possibilities is they might go to the IRS office and say, do you have an employment application I can fill out? So they fill out the employment application, they get called in for interview, they get hired. Do you think that they tell them that as they go out to be IRS agents, that they are unregistered foreign agents, that what they're doing as soon as they start doing it is a 10-year felony? Never. Okay? So now you're beginning to see what I'm saying about this book. You want this book because in the Treasury Department, let me flip to that. We'll just send it around here.
What year was that again, Robert?
Any book from the 80s or 90s will have this in it, that it's the governor of the International Monetary Fund. So you got a 20-year spread as you look for the books. It's probably even in the 70s, whatever. But this one is 96, 97.
Robert,
Yes.
are you saying that every TIGTA agent, every IRS CID agent are unregistered foreign agents?
Okay. I can't give you a blanket yes on that, but I will explain this. 1995, I testified against the International Monetary Fund in a case with Robert Carey. Some of you may know that name. It's K-A-H-R-E, I think it, or K-H, whatever. I can check on it. I stayed at his parents' place, and John Nelson was running depositions and so on. And I testified against the International Monetary Fund. Robert Carey's case was the biggest raid that they'd ever done in Las Vegas history. Well, that wasn't at that time, I don't think. It might have been, I can't recall. But they've done other raids against him too. they were coming against him and he sued them. And John Nelson, as I explained, is like the Starship Enterprise. And he was in the background in Robert Carey's case. And then later when they did actually the biggest raid in Vegas history, 161 counts against Robert Carey. And with John Nelson in the background, the IRS had 0 victories with 161 counts. Okay? And this comes from understanding, you know, who these guys are. And so when Robert Carey's response went in, it was a response from the U.S. Attorney in Las Vegas, but there was also a response from Washington, D.C. Now, the guy in Washington, D.C. that was representing him, his stuff was like, oh, this is all just a mistake because the International Monetary Fund is this wonderful organization who's helping, you know, with the development of Africa and Asia and these underdeveloped countries. And you know, the International Monetary Fund does nothing but wonderful things globally. Well, that all sounds okay until you read John Perkins' book, which was a New York Times bestseller, called Confessions of an Economic Hitman. In that book, John Perkins, who was right there doing that stuff, you know, will tell you that they're involved in murder, extortion, and everything else. Okay? Because they can go to some banana republic and talk to the president there and say, I've got this trunk here with $10 million in it for you personally. If we can help your country with a multi-billion-dollar loan at just 1% interest, which of course they lend them the billion, but they don't lend them the 1%. So what happens? They have to default, right? Because they can't possibly pay back the interest because it doesn't exist. So, you know what I'm saying? If we have these green pieces of paper and we call them foxes instead of dollars, and put them out there, give them 10 million of them, or 10 billion, or whatever, but I don't give them the interest, all they got is that. And they can't possibly pay back the interest. And then when they default, the International Monetary Fund says, oh, well, we'll help you out, we'll bail you out. Sign here, we'll lend you another 20 billion or whatever. And, but of course, it has to be at a higher interest rate because you're not really creditworthy, but we're really helping you out. And so they lend them more to bail them out, and things just get worse. And the fine print says, you know, when they came to them in the first place, by the way, they'll say, well, you got gold mines that went into the country and oil wells, oil in the ground at the other, but you don't have the infrastructure. You don't actually have the mining equipment. You don't have the drilling equipment. You got all these forests in between, but you got no highways. You got no hydroelectric. We can fix that up, you know. And they do all this stuff, and they got the stuff started. But then the country defaults on the loan, and they say, okay, well, we'll lend you more and bail you out. Sign here. And the fine print says that the natural resources go to the International Monetary Fund. And you may not have been aware of it, but they've been doing that here. And what they did is they took from you the national parks.
Yeah.
Okay? And they've already issued things like passports to visit the Grand Canyon. How about it?
They can't take it anywhere. It's okay. It's all your fault. And you know that the mayor of Boise, Idaho has given the Chinese a huge parcel of land next to the airport so that they could land their planes there and build a little city there. Boise, Idaho is where, it's right on the Snake River. And where do they come from the Snake? Where does it go into? The Columbia River. And if you were going to come into this country, how would you come into the country if you were, well, if you were a trucker, like I was, I could keep my money and you couldn't get it. You probably delivered some containers to either Seattle, Los Angeles, or Portland, Oregon. And they have huge storage areas for these things. These storage areas where they'll take these containers, as you've seen a container train go by on the way in here, they'll pack them, they'll stack them 6 and 8 high. Now, if they were stacked with munitions and people, and all of a sudden one night the doors open, and they started up the Columbia River, killing everything they saw, which is what they're going to do. They're going to do that because it's the easiest possible way to get into this country. And we'll run down the Columbia River. Maybe we'll be able to stop it. Maybe we won't. Another comment in regard to what you said. I have a friend in, well, first of all, my first sergeant in my outfit overseas when I was in Germany was a guard for Elsa Cohen at the Nuremberg trials. And he told me exactly what happened to some degree. She became pregnant because she was a nymphomaniac and was a screwball. She had some problem. She really had a problem. But she was also a very beautiful woman. She used to parade naked in front of the troops. And she tattooed beautiful designs on the backs of human people. And I was telling this story in a truck stop in Portland, a very famous truck stop called Jubit's.
Don't.
And a guy,
Hold the line. Don't hold the mic.
oh, a guy there, I'm sorry, was standing over there, and everybody said, "You're crazy. You don't do things like that." She tattooed these things on your back and then sit you down, give you your skin off.
I'm sorry, how is this relevant?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, how is this relevant? We have 4 more minutes of tape. I'm sorry to bust your bubble there, but,
I didn't hear what you said.
good.
How is it relevant?
How is it relevant?
Yes.
How's it relevant? It's going to happen right here.
Her tattoo,
I believe it's going to happen.
her
right here.
tattoo is relevant to what's gonna happen here?
Oh, what happened to that? He made.
No, why is it relevant to what we're talking
The
about?
same thing's happening right now. The
Very
same process going on right now, the same kind of people.
All right,
That's what makes it relevant.
good. 9, 8.
Here's Jody.
Okay, so,
We're on.
we're on. So a gentleman here has raised an issue, and that is regarding motion in limine. And I'm going to pass out, get passed out it. I've got to go to the computer and find the response. But basically, motion in limine is a relatively recent invention, and the prosecution just loves to use that crap. I could share with you a quick little story. So I have a friend, and we've been friends, I guess, for about 15 years, and that is maybe known to you as Constitution Man, or Carl Miller. Anyway, he's visited me in Texas, and I visited him in Michigan, and we're good friends. There was a time when he was basically on his deathbed with Agent Orange poisoning. He did, was it, I forget how many, 3 or 4 tours in Vietnam. So he was terribly ill, but there was a radio talk show, and Alan Dershowitz was on the radio talk show, and extolling the virtues of motion in limine. So Carl Miller picks up the phone, calls in, and reads Dershowitz the riot act. It just tears him up. Dershowitz says to the talk show host of the event, you set me up with a ringer. I'll never speak on this talk show again, never. You know, because he got tore up by Carl Miller. And anyway, I got that stuff in the computer, and we'll pass it out to everybody, because it's one of those things that in the process, people go into the courtroom and they think this is a court of justice, and then they're seeking justice, and then they get overwhelmed because there is none of that. And it's just one shyster shenanigan after another, and motion in limine is just one of those shyster shenanigans.
How do you spell that last word?
Limine.
What is the exact one? Lemon.
Okay, it's to limit what you're going to talk about, or that you're going to question the witnesses about.
It doesn't let you present your defense.
Yeah, they try and cut off your defense, exactly correct. You know, so this last May in Cherokee County, they were bringing this felony charge against me. We went to trial, and the prosecution had this motion in limine. And I kept going outside and, you know, and doing my thing. The judge threatened me, in the first day, he threatened me like 20 times with jailing me or, you know, for contempt. And to the effect that, you know, I'd be in the courtroom with chains and irons on me. But I had to do what I had to do, and in the end, they didn't get a victory that they figured they would. And they did more than just motion in limine. In Cherokee County is the only one I know of. That there's actually a website that documents their corruption on an ongoing basis. And so that, I got in touch with the webmaster, who is anonymous. And he's not in Cherokee County, but he certainly has contacts because he knows what's going on at all times. And I still don't know who this guy is. I really don't even know whether he's male or female. Anyway, the thing is that I go to trial, and there's a jury, and the jury was deadlocked, and it was a mistrial. So after that, this webmaster contacts me, and he informs me that at least 3 of the people on the jury were plants by the prosecution. One of the people on the jury was the son-in-law of the sheriff. And he also happened to be a Baptist preacher. Well, I could just imagine somebody who's used to public speaking, son-in-law with the sheriff, and a preacher, could be a powerful influence in the jury room. And one of the others was a young female, and her father worked for the Jacksonville Daily Progress newspaper as a sales manager. And their circulation was up with all this stuff about me, so they were running a continuous propaganda program against me and always kindling the fire and making it bigger, okay? So, and they listed as the top stories of the year, I was the top story, okay? In their podunk little newspaper. So, you know, and the sales manager's daughter is on my jury. How about it? And then the third one was, you know, I showed you all the picture of the building. On the block, on the next block was a woman who's, socially influential, has a restaurant called Larissa House, and across the street is the police department. Well, various people had mentioned to me that she wanted that building, and that it's the reason why I had so many problems. Just immediately after the real estate closing comes 3 SWAT attacks. And anyway, the banker, that she's associated with, some banker, was on my jury. Coincidence. So, this is the kind of thing that the webmaster on the corruption told me in his message, that this is routine with the district attorney in Cherokee County. So, we'll make a copy of the motion and limine response on that. And like I say, I just plowed ahead in my case and let them threaten me all they want.
I thought you mentioned that you could take it off record and get the jury out by some kind of a bill of something or other, and I don't remember what you called it.
Yeah, we did that and two issues. My friend Brady helped me out, and he does a lot of this stuff with the Public Information Act. So, Brady dug up the information. We had a lot of evidence, and it was that none of the police were valid. They didn't have their paperwork done right. There was not a single police officer that was right. The city had never created a police department, and the mayor wasn't properly in office. City manager wasn't properly in office. None of the city council were properly in office. The whole shebang was completely bogus. Everything. And of course, they motion in limine. They didn't want that stuff in the courtroom, and they were refusing Brady's testimony. And they said, we want to do a bill, and the judge finally relented on that, and so we got Brady on the jury out of the room. We dismissed them for the day, and then we put Brady on, and all of that evidence is in the file. Then we also had Eddie Craig, and for those who don't know Eddie Craig, he works with Randy Kelton, and he had been either a deputy sheriff or a highway patrol or something. Anyway, that guy knows the Texas Transportation Code frontwards and backwards. We can tear him up on all of that. And we had his stuff brought in as a bill as well. So you could get around their tactics, and that's a very good point. I'm glad you brought that up. That if you have evidence that they just absolutely don't want to let in, say, okay, have the jury out of the way, and we're going to put it in a bill, and you get your witness on the stand, you get your evidence in, and it's preserved for appeal, even though the judge is saying he's not going to listen to it.
And what do you call that, though?
They just call it a bill in Texas.
Okay.
Is it a bill of particulars, or?
No.
That's the West.
That'll do an end run around the motion and limiting.
Well, to an extent.
What is the
But
question?
the real end run around the motion and limine is the stuff that I was going to have done up for you. And none of this stuff, you understand, what's being presented here is things that can work, but you can run into a lunatic judge who, okay, Dr. Brooks, for instance. Okay, Dr. Brooks studied out his stuff, and he had Supreme Court cases backing up his position. Now, he was in front of a judge by the name of Bentley. This guy is worse than anything you could possibly imagine. And, I mean, they know even in the courthouse that he's virtually certifiably insane. So Brooks presents his stuff and Bentley says, well, I don't think the United States Supreme Court said that, so that's out of here. You know?
We got the same time here.
You know, I don't think he said that, so that's finished. It's out of here. You know? Just unbelievable. You know,
You still have to get it.
I
in
mean,
there
Brooks
for
is
your-
there testifying to this stuff, and, you know, I mean, I guess Brooks was probably too stunned, and the rest of us too. I mean, what they did to me, by the way, at Brooks's trial is they had me arrested in the middle of his trial so that I couldn't help him. The prosecutor claimed that they had a warrant for my arrest. Two bailiffs took me out of the courtroom, you know, to another part of the courthouse and sit and wait, you know. And there was no warrant for my arrest, even though the prosecutor, the district attorney said there was. And by the time, and they called the U.S. Marshals, and those guys came down, and they said, well, Mr. Fox, you sent a letter to a judge in Wisconsin. And I said, yeah. And they said, well, did you intend to threaten the judge? I said, you know, this is at the time, okay? He said, look at me, I'm blind and I'm crippled. Who am I going to threaten? I'm like Mr. Magoo, you know? And they laughed out loud themselves, you know? And so anyway, they said, well, Mr. Fox, we just, you know, have to check on these things to make sure it isn't a threat. And I said, no, it's no threat at all. See, like, you know, like the judge, for instance, in Tyler could say that I had threatened him because I said that man stealing, the punishment for man stealing is death. But you can't take things out of context. I said the punishment in the Bible at Exodus 21:16, the punishment for man stealing is death. So I didn't threaten the judge with death, just informed the judge that the Bible says that's death. Right? I didn't threaten to kill anybody. And from my perspective, I've already seen it. You know, two officers that arrested me in separate incidents, separate arrests and separate incidents for them because they were in different places. You know, one of them got turned to mush on the freeway. Just smacked with a pickup truck and blown to bits.
Good.
So, you know, that's what they get. I mean, they do evil, and then, you know, our Heavenly Father just whacks them. It's just the way it is. No threat at all. Carla raised the issues of subpoenas, and that you subpoena certain parties, and like I said, I subpoenaed the reporter from NBC. When I subpoenaed the reporter from NBC, that was a television station in Tyler, Texas, and Jacksonville's 30 miles south. Not that that's a big deal, but they got attorneys from Houston to respond. And the attorneys from Houston put in a motion to quash my subpoenas. Now, that's the kind of thing that happens, okay? So you have to be sort of prepared for that, and you have to be able to justify, the relevance of their testimony to your case and things like that. So, you know, they don't let you just harass all kinds of people out there. It has to be something reasonable. that you can make a connection between their potential testimony and your case. And that's how that goes.
One question. The state is always the plaintiff in every action. Can the state be subpoenaed?
That's a real good one now, isn't it? Okay? The state obviously is a fiction. It's a piece of paper. But you could potentially subpoena the Secretary of State. You could potentially subpoena the governor. And you could subpoena the legislative record as to the law and various aspects of that. And then in your local area, wherever that might be, the district attorney, his assistant, they are allegedly representing the state. And so you possibly subpoena them. And some of this stuff, these subpoenas, if you subpoena the right people with the right issues, they may drop your whole case right there on that alone. Because when they know that you're headed to a certain direction and that you could potentially beat them and cause a big problem with, because let me say this, the trial court judge may be able to try and run over top of you, but then, like Mike has said, you do a bill, and that's what I did with Brady's stuff and Eddie Craig's stuff to preserve it for appeal. But then, of course, the jury was deadlocked and it was a mistrial. But you have to do the best you can to get the evidence that you need in, subpoena the right people, ask the right questions. If they don't want to let you get it on the record, you get it in any way with a bill, and you take it the distance. And they will get scared if they do like real dirty work at the trial court level. They don't like for the appeals court, their bosses, to be looking at what kind of jerks they are and how ignorant they are. They held me in Cherokee County, they held me beyond the legal limit. And boy, they didn't want to talk about that one. Because my take on it is they got no excuse. How can ignorance of the law be an excuse for the judge and the district attorney?
Would you consider subpoenaing the Secretary of the Treasury in an IRS case?
Yeah, I would.
My question is, so often when suits are brought against,
You want to come to the microphone so
am I not enough?
Yeah.
No, go to the microphone.
go ahead.
My question is, when a suit's been brought against you, 9 out of 10 times it says United States of America.
Okay.
And my question is, can we subpoena the United States of America? Or who is the United States of America? Who is the real party of interest? Who has the first-hand evidence? And I can't get through any of this stuff because no one has. You're kind of trying on presumptions with a mysterious witness that you can't seem to find.
The United States of America in 3002, Title 28, is a corporation.
That's right. That's United States, though, not the United States of America. Right, it's United States. The United States is a corporation.
All capital letters.
Right, just the United States only. Right. Because when they bring out the president, he doesn't say of America, he says United States. Look it up on Dun and Bradstreet.
This court case, the United States of America, and it's upper lowercase.
Wow.
So tell me who it is.
Yeah.
Well, and now that you mention that, make something here.
But isn't that true just about in every case it's all based on presumption, and there is actually no witness against you in just about every case that you can possibly be charged with. Isn't that the fraud that goes on?
I agree.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yes.
Go ahead, finish writing. And then I
Okay,
have a
just got
question.
one little more bit here to do.
How many people are here from Maricopa County? I'm trying to get ideas, so we can maybe go into what we can do to get the county recorder to start acting right.
In regards to the notices?
In regards to putting anything in there.
Recording. I got something.
Oh,
Unless it's got something. If I can find it.
You have to, if they deny something, you ask them what the remedy is, and they have to give you that to tell you how to get the document filed.
Actually, that part doesn't even matter. I'll have to find the reference, but apparently this works the same in every state, and I got this information from Howard Griswold, who's a phenomenal commercial remedy person, but it's pretty difficult to get information from him directly. But in any case, in the state of Arizona, and supposedly in every state, if you have filed your documents and you have provided the appropriate fee for it, legally it is considered recorded. So the way you do it is you don't go there personally, because you'll have problems with them getting to accept it and all that. You put it in the mail, send it registered with the fee, and even if they do reject it, by law, it is considered recorded as long as it meets whatever recording requirements they have.
No, but
As long as, that's the problem. That's,
hold on.
On microphone.
The requirements that they refer to are not arbitrary. They are very specific. So one of the examples is if the appropriate fee is not provided, they don't have to accept it. One of the other ones is if it's a financial statement, it has to list the debtor, the creditor, stuff like that. Those are the kind of exceptions that that say that they can reject it. So there are very specific requirements that have to be met.
That will be listed in the statute.
Right, they'll be listed in the statute, and after you read them, you'll understand that they can reject it for other reasons, but if one of those reasons is not one of the ones listed in the statute, then it's considered recorded even if they do reject it.
With a third-party witness.
Registrations.
You said that you didn't want to do it yourself, you'd have somebody else do the mailing?
Right, well, no, you can do the mailing yourself. See, the problem is a lot of the complaints are that when people go, like, say, with their freedom documents or whatever they're trying to file, that they go there personally, the recorder looks at the documents and decides, well, I don't want to file these, and then you're kind of stuck. So to get around that, what you do is you mail the documents. They receive them in the mail. You send it certified mail, so you have a certificate that they have received it. And as long as it contains the fee and whatever recording requirements that are supposed to be in there, even if they reject it, at that point it is considered recorded legally, even if they don't record it.
It's notice.
So how do you get a certified copy of that recorded document that was?
You don't need, the distinction is it's considered recorded once it's received with the fee.
I got it. But
That's
how
it.
do I get a certified copy to take into court? The whole reason I'm filing it
No, you don't need a certified copy. The only thing you need to verify or certify is that they received the documents.
So you need a witness.
You attach a
The
copy.
witness, right, the U.S. Postal Service is the witness.
And the document you file, you put the certification number at the top of the
You
document.
don't have a certification number.
You write it in the document.
They don't give you one.
No, certified mail.
Certified.
Yet you send it certified mail, and when they receive it, the U.S. Post Office sends back that certification, or you can get a copy of it on the internet or whatever.
It doesn't meet
But-
the rules of evidence under 901, 902, and 903. How are you gonna get in court?
If they reject it, write them a letter back and ask them what your remedy is. They have to give it to you. A lot of times they will tell you to change the title or something like that, then send it back to them and they will record it.
I like that.
Yes.
Does that work? Have you, has that
Yes,
worked?
yes. I've known two people that it's worked for. So if they deny it, write them a letter back and ask them what the remedy is, and they have to give it to you.
Because we've actually filed documents that they've accepted, and 4 days later, they've returned it with a check saying, we no longer record this. We voided it.
Robert, I have
Yes.
a question. Back to subpoenaing, like the governor, secretary of state, what, et cetera, what kinds of things could you subpoena from them in, say, like a traffic case?
I'm making a note of that right now, because I don't have those documents with me, but I can email you, and then let's put at the same time, everybody,
Okay, I would like that.
you know, so.
We don't want any just email between you two, you guys, you know?
You got 17
Ex parte
minutes.
email.
Ex parte email here.
Okay,
It's a quarter of 12 for your information. We've got plenty of tapes, so. But if we're gonna stop at 12.
Group picture.
The actual statute for Arizona Revised Statutes, it's Title 47, and it's 9516. It says, except as otherwise provided in subsection B of this section, communication of recording to a filing office and tender of the filing fee or acceptance of the record by the filing constitutes a filing.
Or the acceptance, that's.
They signed for it. That's the
Right, but,
signature.
right.
Well, that device is not allowed in the courtroom, it's hereby confiscated.
For those people that have a federal case, they'd be interested in this, but something similar happens in the state anyway. This one here along the top, with the district court in lowercase, this district court was created by the Judiciary Act in the 1700s, okay? And now, you'll see that they do their oaths and other stuff in this court, but you get tried, you know, they'll come against you in this. Now, it's an interesting arrangement because, well, let's say this. In Tim and Don's IRS case, the jurisdiction issue was challenged, and the judge's response was that they had jurisdiction, and he cited numerous cases, and they were all this, okay, the one that was created by the Judiciary Act. Only thing is, this is the one that's trying Tim and Don.
Did you bring that up to them?
Oh, yeah, we're you know, got stuff that, you know, again, I can send you that stuff.
Do we have access to those pleadings?
Absolutely.
Through you?
Yeah.
We got connections?
Yeah,
Good.
you got connections.
All right.
You're a good guy, and yes, you got connections.
All right, good.
That material will be available on Pacer, would it not,
Yeah,
for their case?
yeah. Yeah, because the stuff has gone back and forth, of course, it's been a hell of a battle.
I'd be willing to download it and put it up on my website for everybody to go look at the documents if you want. So I'll get the case number from you. Sure. Yeah. I just stick it under there, like a lot of the other cases.
Which website?
ResearchSociety.org.
What is it?
ResearchSociety.org. And there's a bottom that says cases, and I'll put it under there.
What is it
That
for?
sounds to me like you're proposing
Okay.
collaboration.
Jim and Don. I'm giving you.
Yeah, we'll get the case number to that.
So,
How do you hold the judges accountable for breaking law? I think that's the biggest issue everybody has here.
okay, there's a,
What's the remedies we have for that?
you can do a complaint against the judge or any attorney, and, you know, the bar complaints, they would appear to do nothing about them, and that's pretty well correct as far as the bar goes. But all these attorneys have to be bonded, and when they get their third complaint within a year, they can't get bonded, and that takes them out. So that's,
Third complaint from 3 different people? Or 3 different incidents?
could be 3 different incidents, one guy, I suppose. It's the third complaint, you know? And then with regards to federal judges, my friend Michael Brown had 2 federal judges removed from the bench.
How?
And the way he did it, this is really good, because you can complain about federal judges and you're not going to go anywhere. But what Michael Brown did, because he's teaching seminars and such, he would take a part in the seminar, and he'd have a table set up, and he'd have some of the pleadings on the table so that everyone could come and look at the stuff. And I guess he had the right parts highlighted or whatever. And so you could look at the pleadings and see what went on, and then you could fill out the complaint from you and send it in to the Senate Judiciary Committee on judicial conduct. And he didn't have like 1, 2, or 3 complaints going in. They were like 2,000 or 3,000. So you can imagine they have like personnel files, just like they have, the police department has personnel files under cops. And, you know, there's a difference. If the guy's got no complaints and his file is pretty thin, you know. But if somebody's got a wad of complaints, then you can imagine when it hits 2,000 or 3,000 complaints, it's a block. And he, you know, blew off 2 federal judges that way, right off the bench. Like they weren't just, I think they were gone. So you could do complaints like that. And another thing is, you might want to look at Randy Kelson's website, and there's criminal complaints there. And when you know, bring criminal complaints against them, you may or may not get the handcuffs on them, but you'll sure get the system riled up about the situation. Yeah, you get their attention. Carla?
It's my understanding from a reliable source that you go after them on not what they did do, but what they didn't do.
Okay.
Dereliction of duty, you talked about.
Breach of duty?
That's
Yeah,
what
it's
I-
easier to prove
I
the
think-
concept, it's easier to prove something
Yeah.
they did not do and they were supposed to, than you have to prove that which they did. It's much easier. Based on their
Okay, good.
performance.
I think what that means is by stating what they did not do explains the violation of law that they broke.
Makes sense.
It was actually a judge that told me that, and it wasn't elaborated on. Just what I was told, the exact words were, because I asked the same question, and I was told you get them on not what they did, but what they didn't do. That's how you get them.
That makes sense, because it's like, this is the law, and they didn't
So
do
take
this.
it for whatever it's worth.
And time-wise? Oh, okay.
So it's 11:52.
But we got plenty of tape, right?
Yes.
We have 37 minutes left.
Okay. Did you want to take lunch at 12, or we just go for the 37 minutes and then take lunch?
Be good.
Okay, good, that's fine. So,
You want to distribute those?
okay.
Is that,